Wish I could post that comment from Mr. Gregory. Evening, Alan. From me and Mrs. Gregory, you are ace. Yeah, that should be my new slogan. Thank you so much, Colin. That is really kind of you. Yeah, you're a silver-tongued devil. Do appreciate it. Listen, if you're new to this, Watch with Mamemeister is a play on the Watch with Mother thing, which was a thing back in the 70s. It's when, before Sky Television came along, and this, as a kid growing up in the 70s, you literally had 3 TV channels. You had BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV, or in Scotland it was Scottish Television. And yeah, the only programmes you got on in the morning was called Watch with Mother, and it was, I don't know how many hours it was, a couple of hours. You got some TV programmes. So this is my little play in that. We're not going to be watching kids programmes. We're going to be watching some real early computer related programmes. Now, this is the third one. I mean, I've done quite a few of these, but this is the third one in the last 3 weeks. And we've been watching a programme called Microfile, which was, it's a collection, it's the best bits of a programme called Micro Live, which was broadcast in the BBC to tie in with the computer programme, no pun intended, that Thatcher brought in. She thought that every computer, every school should have, or every kid, I should say, at school should have access to a computer. So they brought out the BBC computer, and that was put into all the schools. And yeah, they made a programme called, I think it was called The Computer Programme. Then there was Making the Most of the Micro, and then there was Micro Live. And this thing we're going to watch tonight is the best bits, the juiciest chunks of viewing you could possibly hope for. Whew. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking bollocks, and I'm going to attempt to try and get the first one going. Now, I talk from time to time over it. It's not me. Well, I'm trying to make it entertaining, but at the end of the day, these programmes are quite interesting to watch. So I'm not going to talk too much. So let me just get this. Video watching number 2. Hang on, don't get too excited. This is not the one we're going to be watching. Properties. So we're going to watch microfile number 5. Here we go. Right, enjoy. I'm going to open up a copy. Shoot the bloody thing first. They use the, evening Stephen, evening Brian, they use the same intro for all these programs, but it is a great intro. It just takes you right back when you hear that music.
Hello and welcome to Microfile. Now, how powerful is an Amiga, a BBC Micro? And what is power anyway? Is it in the hardware or the software? If you're considering buying a computer, one of the first things a salesman is likely to do is to quote from the PCW benchmarks.
There's a lovely
These tell you how fast the machine is.
Never liked
So,
that
if you never really understood what a benchmark was testing, this one's for you.
John Colt, what are benchmarks?
Well, benchmarks are just computer programs, like this one, which you can run on a range of different computers. This one's just a few lines of BASIC. It's a basic benchmark. And all it does is print an S, set K to 0, add 1 to K, and if K is less than 1,000, then it goes round again. So quite
it's
simple.
Just counting to 1,000, in fact. But I noticed straight away that you could easily speed that up. For example, these could be integer variables, you could lose the goto, you could put multiple commands on one line and so on.
We'll put the goto in especially for you, of course.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, but the point is, if you change the program and
Lovely
optimise it for each
by,
computer,
Peter.
we'd really be testing your ability to write a good program. And we don't want to test that. What we want to do is to test how well the computer works. So we use exactly the same program, with all its deficiencies, as you rightly say, on all the machines. That way we compare the machines, not you.
So it's a shoddy program. Who wrote it?
Thanks. Well, I put these benchmarks together back in '77. Actually, I pinched most of them from another magazine.
It all comes out now.
Anyway, yes.
So you did all those PCW benchmarks, or you collected them?
Yes.
Right. Well, let's see this one in all its glory running.
Right, I have a stopwatch here. If I can hold it very still,
stopwatch.
type
What the hell?
run, and start the watch together. We'll see how long this one takes. Wait for the E stop, and that's about 2.7 seconds.
Right. Now,
Something like that.
first question, obviously, why are you using a stopwatch when there's an internal clock?
Well, there's an internal clock on this machine, but there isn't on other machines, and particularly when we wrote this thing, there weren't internal clocks on any of them. If you want the program to run on all the machines, you can't afford to use a clock. So this program, as is, will run on lots of machines.
But a stopwatch isn't terribly accurate, is it?
Certainly not the way I did it just then, no. But no, it isn't. But actually, if you're timing, this one's only 2.7 and stopwatch isn't very good. Normally, you're timing longer things and it's okay. But even with this one, if you run it 3 or 4 times, it's okay.
So there are many other benchmarks.
Yes, there are. I've got a more complicated one here. Another one in the series, benchmark 7. This has got some of the same elements.
Del Boy not into
K
it?
equals
Oh my
0
God.
from the old program,
Yeah,
and
Harold
if K is less
Neighbours.
than 1,000, that's from the previous program. But there are other lines in, like this one here, dim M5. That's dimensioning an array. There's some really wild arithmetic here. A equals K divided by 2 times 3 plus 4 minus 5. You know,
Higher mathematics.
pretty stretching
Yes.
stuff. And a go sub here, go sub 230, which just does a return.
All the usual things you might want to do in BASIC.
Right.
I see. But of course, there's nothing like the procedures that are exclusively BBC Micro.
Exactly. It's
I
got to run
do
on everything.
notice this, though. This is BBC Basic, isn't it? Colour
right.
129,
Well,
sound 1, minus
The
15,
producer,
etc.
God bless him, insisted that we put that in, turn the screen red. So we've got a specific line in each of these machines. Now, we've actually got 4 machines here. At the far end, we've got a Commodore Amiga with a program in. We've got a Sinclair
the
Spectrum
1000.
Plus.
Where's
And we've got
there?
an
What's
Atari
this first
520
computer?
ST. And here we've got a BBC Master System. They've all got the same program in. We'd like
Right.
to run them. I think if we get Leslie, come on in on that one,
Okay.
please. And Mac on the Spectrum.
There's
Should
Mac.
point out that's a Spectrum 128 not
Mamemeister.
Spectrum Plus. There is a
Yes.
difference. OK, are we ready? 3.
no.
We're
No,
not.
no.
No,
We're
yes,
live.
I am now.
3, 2, 1, go.
Right.
Now, mine hasn't run. My function key has collapsed on me, which just goes to prove it is live. Now, at the moment, we've got 4 different micros. They've got 4 different processors. Obviously, we're going to get quite a span.
Amiga's gone. Amiga's gone.
How long was that?
And it was 14 seconds, Fred.
Right, well, I happen to know that this one would have been, if I got it right, it would have been 17 seconds.
And in rehearsals, this one did it in
Evening, Dale.
21 and a squirt seconds
What's
as well.
it done now?
22.
Right, OK. So what about you, Mac? How are you getting
Spectrum very reliably, calculating it on very deliberately. It's going to win in the end.
in
It's
the
the
end.
tortoise.
Right, excellent. So, look, why did the Amiga win? Was that because it's a 16-bit?
Well, the benchmark tests various things. Yes, it's 16-bit, but really what it tests is how good the basic interpreter is, or that's another factor. And in many ways, that's testing how good the programmer was who wrote the basic interpreter.
Right.
So it's really testing several
Christ,
factors.
C64
there's a
didn't
whole
take
lot of
part,
things
and
it's
still
not
be
testing
bloody
too.
running.
Exactly. Now, the dear old
Put my
Spectrum
shoulder,
is
it cooks so.
a bit slow on this benchmark,
Bloody slow.
but it's got some darn good graphics, and you get
Yes,
some assembly
yes.
language games, which are first rate. So it doesn't test the graphics, it doesn't test the disk drives, how good the keyboard is, what the value for money is. All those things are missed out on this benchmark. You've got other benchmarks for those things.
Of course, it would be possible to put it together on micro.
There goes the Spectrum.
Ah, excellent.
77 seconds.
77
Reliably, I
seconds.
might assure you.
Right. Well, actually, that is a bit faster. That we're actually operating that in 48K mode, because we discovered earlier today that if you run that in 128 mode, it takes, I think, 107 seconds, which is about 30-odd% slower than that. Very strange. It would be possible, wouldn't it, to put together a micro which just performed well on benchmarks and nothing else?
Yeah, it wouldn't be much good for that. The other thing you can do is to choose your benchmarks very carefully by each machine. So when you're promoting a particular machine, you show off the benchmarks that it works very well at. And that's something we see repeatedly in the magazines, of course.
So does that mean we're not really to take them too seriously?
Yes, very much so. Just one more factor, to consider, but don't take them too seriously.
So which of all the benchmarks is the best one?
Well, Max said to me during rehearsals, very good advice. It's really to run the program that you actually want to run in real life. That's the best benchmark on the whole thing.
Right.
One of the major advantages of the newer, more powerful machines is their much-quoted ease of use.
What the hell
No
has she
longer
got
do you
on?
have to have a lot of technical know-how to be able to use them. Switch on most computers for the first time, and chances are you'd see little more than a collection of meaningless messages and a flashing cursor. But now you can have a WIMP instead, as Fred found out when he reviewed the new Commodore Amiga.
WIMP actually is an easy way of using a computer without typing in all the usual codes and incantations. In fact, for a lot of uses, you can forget about the keyboard altogether. WIMP, W-I-M-P, stands for Windows, Icons, Mouse and Pull-Down Menu. Right, well, what's all that
Never
about?
knew that.
This is the mouse. It's a rollerball device, as you can see.
It's a shit mouse
As I
well.
move it around on the desktop, I'm also moving this arrow around on the
There you are,
screen.
Dale, there's your first computer, mate.
Right, that's the mouse. Now pull down menus. A few of those up here. There's one, another, and a third. Now this is another alternative to typing in. So for example, if I want to enter the word redraw, instead of keying it in, I simply point to it and select. Windows are these things here, the boxes on the screen. Now you can think of those as sheets of paper on a desk. Using the mouse, I can swap them over.
Sheets of paper on a desk.
I can move them about. Let's put that one in the front again. Move it down. And I can even change the size if I want to.
Thing is, that was revolutionary back in the day. It really was.
And
Now it just
icons
looks
are these
archaic.
images here, these symbols which represent the programs you might want to select. So let's load up the demos file. Right, I move the mouse to it and press a button. And
Even
straight
back in the
away
day,
up
calling
comes
the time
another
mouse was
window
shit.
and some more icons, each of which is a program that I might run. Well, firstly, I'll kill off this window here and tidy up the screen a bit. Get a shot of that. Move
Get
this
shot.
Top. Now, ready to load something up. I'll try this program here, which is called Lines. Once again, move to it, click the button, and up it comes. This is a graphics demonstration, so it really needs to be big. So simplicity itself to move to the top, stretch the window, and there it is. And that gives you some idea of what the WIMP philosophy offers. But so far, this hasn't done anything that you might not have seen on other machines. This, though, is the new Commodore Amiga, and it can do a lot more than the micros you may be used to. And to show that, well, let's try another demonstration here, this boxes demo. There, I'll stretch that one again, move it to the top,
That's going to make you rush it and buy one.
make it a bit bigger.
What's a bit of
Now,
porn
you'll
through them?
notice that the
We'll
lines
bloody
program
buy
carries
it.
on running. And in fact, all the time I've been speaking, down here hiding away is yet another program. This is another nice facility, being able to bring this screen on. So you see, we've got 3 programs going there. This, you see, is a multitasking machine. Each of these programs gets a share of the computer's time. The computer switches from the lines program to the boxes program to the triangles program thousands of times every second. Well, of course, the more programs you run, the slower each one gets. Look how jerkily that triangles program is moving. But if I remove some of these others here, kill that off, kill that and that, watch what happens to the speed. Those triangles are drawing much quicker now. It's got the processor all to itself, so the program can run faster. Well, you may be wondering how the Amiga gets this sort of speed. In fact, it's got a 32-bit microprocessor, and that means it works on chunks of data 4 times the size of conventional 8-bit machines, and it uses modern chips which are faster anyway. Here's the motherboard from inside, and this is the 32-bit microprocessor. The smart design doesn't stop there, though. Here are some custom chips, specially designed chips. These 2 here handle the graphics and the animation, and this one handles just the sound. So the processor doesn't have to do all the thinking for the machine. It can delegate certain specialist tasks while it gets on with other things. And there's another advantage that comes from using these custom chips. They can pack a lot of functions into a single integrated circuit. And the result is a computer with very few components, which is cheaper to make and more difficult to copy. Now, the graphics chip will generate over 4,000 colours on screen at the same time, as you can see here. Although in normal use you'll have to make do with just 32, I'm afraid. But you can get some pretty snazzy animation, as we've set up over here. This they call Robo City. Now, if you wanted a complicated animation like this on a conventional micro, firstly you'd have to compromise on the colours. But you'd also have to get the software to manipulate those characters, remembering, say, that the old man here moves behind the fire hydrant, but in front of the female robot, and so on. The Amiga has dedicated hardware, those custom chips, to look after the drawing and the redrawing, replacing the background and so on. Right, well, much as I like that demo, I'll pull that one down and move on to the sound, because sound is normally the forgotten feature of a micro. Traditional sound chips give you a rather crude quality. But with custom-built chips, you can get quality like this. I find that pretty stunning. That is actually stereo sound, and it's a sign of how seriously they take the sound facilities of this machine, that you can get more sounds by loading in directly the digitized sound files from the Fairlight, one of the most sophisticated of the professional computer musical instruments. If you don't fancy the old strings touch, what about this one? Heavy man. It's also got text-to-speech facility, which you may remember we demonstrated in our review of speech chips in Program 1. Well, all this is fine, but what's it going to be used for? Well, multitasking has real uses. You can leave the machine to get on with, say, printing a long document at the same time as word processing and while the computer's sorting out some records on your database. But there does seem to be some confusion as to who this machine is aimed at. In the States, it's marketed as a home micro at about $1,500. Well, bigger disposable incomes, of course, over there. But in the UK, they're planning to launch it as a small business machine, which perhaps means that some of the facilities, such as this, are just not going to be used. Of course, any machine lives or dies by its software. There is an IBM emulation package for the Amiga, giving business users access to at least the top 25 IBM PC programs. But it takes time for software houses to learn the tricks of a new machine. In the meantime, you might make do
I would
with
love
something
to get
like
it
this.
on my channel.
It's a graphics package which I'm not going to attempt to work myself.
Impossible.
Being worked live
Anyone
from upstairs in the gallery. It'll move about, and it gives facilities which you would normally get only on dedicated graphics systems. No wonder it got a standing ovation at the Writers' Conference this week.
Pretty snazzy graphics there from the Commodore Amiga, which heralded a new era in powerful home computing when it was launched in the US in July '85. But power isn't just about hardware, it's the software as well, with better programming languages and techniques which take us further down the road to what might be called artificial intelligence. FREF investigated advances in computer vision, which will aid robotic investigation of dangerous areas such as 3 Mile Island.
People in the borough of Middletown, there has been an accident at 3 Mile Island. All pregnant women and preschool children should evacuate out of a 5-mile radius.
3 Mile Island, scene of the world's worst nuclear accident. 6 years ago, the core of this reactor overheated and began to melt. It took only minutes for the core to be damaged, but the reactor will take a decade to be cleaned up. Some of the interior is still so radioactive that only machines can survive there. A lot of money has been spent on producing robot vehicles which can move around under remote control. The ultimate aim is for them to be able to navigate on their own, identify objects, and do useful work, using artificial intelligence to decide what to do. This machine is being lowered into one of the worst areas, the lower containment vessel, where the floodwater is radioactive. The vehicle just setting off to explore was one of a number developed at nearby Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. A park keeper's delight, this one keeps off the grass and stays on the path using a video camera to scan the ground ahead. Computers analyze the scene, looking for parallel lines in the machine's plane of movement. The microcomputers on board control the steering, keeping it on the path without human intervention. Because the full analysis of what it sees requires a mainframe computer to do the calculations, it must relay its pictures back by radio.
Absolutely.
From its camera, it captures a series of digitized, high-contrast images and analyzes them, looking for features, in this case, parallel lines. It then looks for changes between one image and the next, and it is those changes which make it adjust its steering. Professor Red Whitaker is in charge of the project.
But there are lots of parallel lines in the world. How does it keep them separate?
Well, in this case, it's given some cues.
Professor Red.
Specifically that it looks for lines which are parallel, evenly spaced, lines that are long. And using that criterion, it could, for instance, tell the difference between a road edge and a blade of grass.
Does it ever make mistakes?
Well, certainly. Our worst foul-up, which was that this machine was following this path that we're sitting on now and traveling in that direction. It looked into the scene, took a look at a tree, and interpreted it in the following way: a pair of parallel edges that are long, that are straight, that will cast into its scene as an excellent road model. And it decided that that looked better than the path, took the tree, climbed the tree, and that was the end of that particular one. But in fact, the foul-ups are as common as the successes.
But the responsibility of letting this powerful machine loose in the real world in its present simple-minded state is a heavy one, especially for academics used to the safety of the laboratory. How would you like to meet one of these on a dark night? The inside of 3 Mile Island is a hostile one for any machine. Highly radioactive water scoured out the containment building and has left a lethal scum.
I'm trying to even remember. I think this is 1986.
Radiation levels here would be enough to give a man a lethal
86,
dose. Prolonged exposure is enough to burn out a video camera and affect circuitry on equipment which isn't properly shielded. On this unique film, we are seeing what Red Whitaker's machine saw last year inside 3 Mile Island as it moved down the now deserted corridors. A different approach to automatic navigation is being tried out back in the less hazardous corridors of Carnegie Mellon University. Instead of using vision to find its way about, this robot uses sonar, in other words, high-frequency sound waves, which are reflected back from objects in its path. I gather that robot in the hallway has a name.
Yes, we call him Lurch.
Lurch scans the corridor using a ring of ultrasonic sensors, and you can see on the screen a representation of how it moves forward. The 3 parallel lines show its proposed path. As it sweeps around, it's plotting the position of walls and other objects and measuring its distance from them. If there is nothing in its way, it moves forward.
Sonar is good because it immediately tells you things about your environment. It tells you where you can and cannot go. So the information is immediately useful. A robot using sonar doesn't have to bump into anything because it always knows how far things are away from it.
Okay, what does it not do so well?
Well, it has a couple problems. It obviously
Evening,
sees
Mr.
at
LA.
this level. It won't see things down here, and it won't see things up in the air. So it's possible for the robot to bump into something that it hasn't seen. It also gets fooled by things like the metal door outside our lab actually behaves like a mirror, just as people would be fooled by a room full of mirrors. Sonar can be fooled when the beams reflect
By
off
an
of.
acoustic mirror.
Exactly.
It's actually really good, Stephen. And
Well,
the
it's
reason
all
I
well
bought
and
it
good
was
to use
because,
sonar
I
to
was
build a
watching
picture of the
Breaking
walls of
Bad,
a room so that the robot
and,
doesn't run into them.
what's
But
the young guy
what
called
happens
again?
when
He
the
had
robot's
one.
in the room and has to do
Yeah, it's
useful
great.
work? Sonar's
You
not
get
good
yourself
enough.
one.
How could sonar pick up this cup in the midst of all these objects and interpret what it was? You've got to use some kind of computer vision instead, and that's a much, much more difficult task. This device is being used to test an alternative approach to computer vision. It starts here, where an infrared laser diode creates a point of light, which is spread into a line by this half-cylindrical mirror. The line scans across the object and is picked up by this lens. The computer knows what angle the lens is at, what angle the light's at, and is continually triangulating as it scans along the object. It does this several times, different angles, and builds up a three-dimensional picture from its two-dimensional data. This is what the computer sees. Jerry Agan has been working on this problem for 15 years. Jerry, how does the computer sort anything meaningful out of that jumble of white lines?
Well, the idea is to build up a model in terms of features. For example, if it were looking for a flat surface, it would take a scan across in this direction, say like so, and then it would orient itself, say like this, and take another scan in a perpendicular direction. So if from two consecutive scans it finds that the surface is flat, it knows that there's a flat plane at that point.
And what does it do with that information?
Okay, that information isn't sufficient to
Yeah,
tell,
right. Oh,
say,
sadly,
the
my
difference
Hoover is
between
literally
this
like a
and this, because they both
alarm
have
spinner
flat planes.
plate.
So it has to
It
go
doesn't
out
look
and
scary,
find more
it's like this.
features. For example, edges, cylindrical surfaces. It would then have to go in and say, if it might be this, and if it might be this, where should I look in order to be able to tell the difference? So it has to it'll actually go out and
search
looking
for
for
the
that loop. Yes,
I understand.
and that will distinguish.
Of course, there's yet a further level of difficulty to the problem. Once you've gotten into the room and identified what's there, you have to deal with it in some way. Now, that's a big problem, right, Hans?
It involves integrating sensors, motion coordination, servoing to the actual manipulation. We're working on a time scale roughly 2 or 3 years on a problem that should enable one of our robots in that time to...
Yeah. I'm with you, Ox. There's a fucking big love heart thing.
Identify
I
a door
have no idea how to
visually.
get rid of it.
Step one.
Servo towards the door. This is a
Pain in the
navigation
bloody
problem.
arse.
With an arm extended.
Which is an engineering problem.
Yes, well, we are at the moment going to be working with a rather specialized arm, but the idea is that eventually we go to other things as well. Robot approaches door, servos hand onto doorknob.
Just like that.
Tightens hand, opens door, and then pulls back. Using, we have a robot with omnidirectional mobility, which makes this possible. Releases doorknob.
And walks out the door.
Next week, we'll be spreading the word with a look at computer languages, speech synthesis, and the teaching of electronics. So until then,
Yeah,
bye-bye.
you got that to look forward to, folks. Yeah, these programmes are dry as shit, but you know what? They're interesting. Who's one more? I usually play two of them. If you want, put your hand up. Somebody can tell me if you want another one, or will we call it a night? Let me know. you'll be pleased to know I think there's 10 episodes of this, so yeah. Right, come on, first person to put their hand up. Do you want one more, or shall we call it a night? I don't mind. Yes, right, Colin has spoken. Okay, let me just get that. So this will be Microfile episode 6. I think I might have them actually. Computer Chronicles. I'm sure I've got them as well. Let me have a look. No, I don't actually. I've not got that. Tons of stuff to watch.
Hello and welcome to this week's Microfile, with a chance to see again some of the best
He's got the same
items
bloody
from
jumper
the
on.
live series. This week we look at communicating with micros. When this Apricot Portable was launched in 1984, it was sold as the first micro to obey spoken commands. Well, you can see it's got a built-in microphone here. But in reality, it can only understand a limited number of single words. Getting a computer to understand ordinary speech is still one of the major problems of artificial intelligence research. However, things are easier the other way round. Even your micro can speak if you buy the right add-on.
Some machines like this RML Nimbus can even talk in your voice.
This Nimbus works like a digital sound recorder. Earlier today I used a microphone to record that sentence, and the Nimbus stored away some 8,000 samples for each second
Could you
of speech.
literally make
To
Fred
speak,
any
it
more
just reads
geeky though?
those samples back. Well, that's all very well, but what can it do that a £20 cassette recorder can't? Well, of course, a computer can decide what to say and when under the control of a program. For instance, this is a machine you might find in schools. Just imagine the potential for software that can do this kind of thing in the teacher's own voice.
Well done, Katie. You've scored 9 out of 10.
Excellent quality, but 30 seconds of speech would use up about 128 kilobytes of memory. That's the equivalent of about 50 pages of typed A4, and it's far more memory than the average home or school micro can offer. So how can you get intelligible speech using less memory? Well, it can be done, but you'll lose some of those human qualities. To begin with, you'll need one of these. It's a miniature synthesizer. It can make all kinds of sounds, but it was particularly designed to simulate the human voice. And you'll also need another chip to tell it what sounds to make. This one is a ROM, a read-only memory. And the data in here instructs this chip to make complete English words. You'll find a pair of chips like this inside the familiar Speak and Spell, which is an educational toy.
Spell green.
Obviously, it helps children with their spelling. But with different data in the ROM, you can get your BBC Micro to talk in Kenneth Kendall's cultured tones.
28. 30.
Well, here's a program which is reading the temperature of the studio, and as you can hear, it's pretty hot in here. It's speaking it out. Well, that could be useful if you were running a scientific experiment and needed to keep your eyes on other things. Well, yes, thank you, Kenneth, that's great. With both the Speak and Spell and the Kenneth Kendall ROMs, the data is stored as complete words. So the only words they can speak are the ones they come with. In this case, it's about 100. Fine for some uses, but for general applications, that could be a problem. Have you ever tried a conversation with just a 100-word vocabulary? Well, it can cramp your style. For more words, you'd need more chips. So for a full vocabulary, the problems and the expense would be horrendous. The answer seems to lie not in whole words, but word parts. That is, component sounds of speech, which, when strung together correctly, can be used to construct any English word. Things like sh, f, a, I, k, that sort of thing. These sounds are called phonemes, or in some situations, allophones, and reasonable English can be built from just about 40 or 50 of them. By storing that small number of phonemes in a ROM, any English word can be pronounced by stringing together the correct sequence. And that's the approach that Computer Concepts have taken with their new software for the BBC Micro, which costs about £33. To code in words, you have to think about how they sound, not how they're spelt. For example, here's part of a sentence that I'm working on at the moment. This is not as easy as it. Well, notice that is has been coded as IZ. You see, otherwise the micro would say is. Well, I need the word sounds to complete that phrase, and the first phoneme is easy, that's just S, S. But the next sound is a bit of a problem. Ow. You see, there isn't a letter on the keyboard for ow, so, as ever, if all else fails, reach for the handbook. Well, here we are, and it's got a list of vowel sounds here with different words they might appear in. For example, here's E and O down here. Ah, yes, there we are. Clown, that's the ow sound, that's the one I want, and that's coded as AW. Fair enough. AW. That's sow, now N, obviously. And I think I can probably manage without that D, because we don't say sounds, we say sounds. So, Z to finish it off. And how's that? Oh, that's not too bad, quite recognisable. Just a bit flat, something like a tame Dalek. Well, no problem. This system even allows some kind of emphasis. Let's punch that word sounds. That needs an asterisk in the right place. And notice how the inflection of all those other words is tailored to build up to sounds. That's pretty convincing. The main problem is I had to translate each of those words into the phoneme equivalent. That takes a long time and a bit of experimentation. Of course, it would be great if the machine could speak from standard text, and you could get your computer to read your electronic mail to you over the telephone. But that's a tall order, or to coin a phrase, it's not as easy as it sounds. Text-to-speech needs a system which understands the grammar, the sense, and the context of words. Well, they haven't quite got there yet, but some systems are pretty close. Here are just a few add-on units. They each have software which applies simple language rules to the words to guess the pronunciation. And this sentence is an acid test. Power mowers are thoroughly tough, though. Although those words look similar, we know that they're pronounced differently. But what do the computers make of it? First of all, this system here.
Power mowers.
Well, I'm not too sure about that word thoroughly, but the rest of it was all right. This is a standard Commodore 64 with an add-on unit at the back from Curra. It's the Curra Speech 64, and there it is. And it only cost about 30 quid. So really, I think at that price it's a thoroughly good buy. Over here we've got a BBC Micro with yet another add-on. This is the Namal Type and Talk. And that sounds like this.
Power mowers are thoroughly tough.
Well, it made some kind of sense of thoroughly, a little bit mechanical, I think. But that's £171, and that unit is compatible with most home micros. Over here, there's a much more expensive piece of hardware. It's the ICL Professional unit, costing about £1,000, and that sounds like this.
Power mowers are thoroughly tough.
Oh, not bad at all. It sounds very confident, anyway. And finally, those were all add-on units, but over here there's the machine that set the industry buzzing. Everybody is saying that the Commodore Amiga is the machine of the future, and it's interesting that they've provided text-to-speech as standard.
Power mowers are thoroughly tough, though.
Well, that test was none too serious, but to see how valuable this can be in practice, we've been to see one person who's using the speech system as part of his everyday life. You may remember him from one of our earlier series.
Richard Gomm is severely disabled. His only means of communication is by the pointer attached to his head. He uses this to spell out letters. Over the past few years, the keyboard of his computer has been his lifeline. He's even used it to produce 80,000 words for a thesis for a doctorate in philosophy. A monumental typing task, even for someone able-bodied. His latest link with the world is a Namel speech synthesizer, which now means that, to a limited extent, he can use the phone. A Tandata auto-dial modem linked to a BBC Micro gets him connected.
Most of the patience of a saint typing with one finger at a time. Or
for this call, he's already prepared some phrases in advance.
Broadhaven. 472, hello?
Is that a Piper residence?
Yes, hello Richard, how are you?
I am well. How are you?
Oh, I'm quite well, thank you.
Have I got a problem for you?
Oh, tell me about it.
He types the words on the Apple Micro, And the synthesizer's software then works out the pronunciation using 400 speech rules and speaks down the line for him.
Every time I access my floppy, it crashes.
Well, I think I'll have to come over and have a look at it sometime this week. Have you got a day free?
Typing other words letter by letter is very slow and might make people ring off in frustration. So he speeds things up by using some word anticipation software that he's written himself.
Friday.
Oh no, Friday's out. Have you got another day?
It makes a guess at what he means from just a few letters.
Thursday.
And he uses single characters or codes for commonly used words.
Thank you. Goodbye.
John Piper is Richard's friend and technical advisor. How does he see the system developing?
He can now use the telephone and speak to anyone. But you still have the problem of the rate at which he can make his messages. One of the answers that we're looking at, or one of the possibilities, is the use of an extended keyboard such as this, that gives him very quick access to a very much larger range of utterances that are possible with the conventional QWERTY keyboard.
So, speech synthesis is with us and already of great use to the disabled, but it'll be quite a time before clear and pleasantly inflected text-to-speech will be cheap enough to build into every micro. A language most micros do speak, however, is BASIC, although few of them speak the same dialect. But in one form or the other, it's the language many people first learn when they want to program a computer. Yes, but is BASIC good enough? What about all the others, C, Pascal, Forth and so on? Leslie and I embarked on a kind of Cook's tour of the major attractions. Now, most micros come with BASIC built in. It's popular because it's fairly easy to understand. Well, here, for example, is part of one of the listings. And there we are, you can see it's even got English words in it like if, print, and input and so on. Of course, the microprocessor chip inside the computer can only carry out very simple instructions like comparing two numbers or moving a number from one part of memory to another. So when you run a BASIC program, not when you type it in, but when you run it, it's converted into those simple instructions, or what's called machine code. Now, although the machine code is very fast, the translation process takes some time, so BASIC runs rather slowly. But of course, there are other languages you can use on a micro. We'll have a quick look at a few, starting with Pascal. Now, the top listing over here is in BASIC, and the bottom one is Pascal. And both of these are programs to multiply two numbers together and print out the result on the screen. We'll look at the BASIC first. Well, the first three lines we've got here, line 10, 20 and 30, just set up three variables. A is a number, B is a number, and C is the answer of A times B. Now, line 40 here prints out a bit of text, the answer equals, and the result C. Line 50 just ends the program. Now, the Pascal listing, first of all, you notice that Pascal hasn't got the line numbers that BASIC has. None of those 10, 20s, 30s and so on. Also at the top here, the program has to have a name. In this case, it's called multiply. And there are the variables here defined at the top. Variables A, B and C, those are the letters we're going to use, and they're integers, they're whole numbers. Then here comes the program. It's surrounded with these begin and end markers. And the guts of the program in the middle here, much the same as the BASIC, except they use the word write line instead of print. Now, the major difference for the programmer is it makes you think in an ordered manner. Once a program segment is written, you've got to think of it as a block. You can't just dive into the middle as you can with BASIC. Now, Pascal is being pushed as a very good language for education because it forces you to think in that structured way. But there's nothing to stop it being used for other applications. For example, it's one of the in-house programming languages for Apple computers.
Logo is a language that was specifically designed for education, and it's often used with a turtle like this. It's particularly good for teaching the simple concepts of programming and mathematics. At the same time, it protects the user from some of the raw edges of computers. Now, it can also be used to produce screen graphics. And this complex pattern here is the result of a very simple program. And it shows very well how Logo enables you to build a program step by step. The basis for this pattern is a square. So the first thing you do is define your square. You do that by saying repeat 4 times the action of going forward by the length you're going to go forward. You haven't yet stated what that is. And when you've done that, you turn left 90 degrees. Repeat that 4 times and you've got yourself a square. So then you can incorporate the
Logo
square
getting
into the
mentioned
program, and the
when they were
program
using
reads
one of
here,
these,
repeat
tortoise
36
things, or whatever
times
it's called.
the square, and it already knows about that. Now you define the size, it's going to be side 200, and after each square, turn left by 10 degrees, and then you repeat that 36 times. And if you see the program running, you'll see that actually its makeup is very self-evident. There you've got 36 squares turning themselves into a circle.
Now, one of my favourite languages is Forth. It's available for most micros, including the Electron here. Forth was originally devised to control radio telescopes like this one in Kitt Peak, Arizona. But these days it's used for everything from washing machines to the computer control of movie cameras, for instance in the film Star Wars. Here's how it works. If I type in this word VList, I get a complete list of the Forth vocabulary, all the words that Forth understands. In fact, I'll hold it there. All of these down here are built-in Forth words, standard Forth words, except for this one here, hi, which is one that I made up myself. Now, if I type in hi, you'll see what it does. Prints a friendly greeting here, hello and welcome to Micro Live. Now, the beauty of Forth is you can build up new words using the words it already knows. So that's what I'll do. I'll define a new word which I'll call big hi. Definition starts with a colon. The word is big hi. What do I mean by that? Well, 100 times, starting at 0, do the following things. Just do that hi program, print out the message, and that's a loop. And that is the end of the definition, and that's a semicolon. Now, as soon as I press the return key, that little program is turned instantly into machine code. Shazam. OK, it says, what next? Well, next we'll do it by just typing in big hi. Big hi. And there we are, very friendly greeting 100 times. Big hi is now part of the Forth vocabulary. So you see, Forth can be extended to do whatever particularly interests you. Traditional software writing involves the programmer in breaking down a problem into manageable procedures. But an alternative approach, well, for some applications at least, is to chuck the problem to the computer and leave the machine to sort it out. And for that, you need a language like Prolog. Now, Prolog stands for Programming in Logic, and this is the version available for Spectrum.
Windows.
Right, well, I've been telling the computer here about a bicycle. For example, I've said in the program, the electric flex is part of the lighting system. The hub is part of the wheel, the gear cog is part of the wheel, and the spoke is part of the wheel. And I've also told the machine about the relationship of those parts. For example, X is part of a bicycle if X is part of the wheel. Makes sense, doesn't it? And down here, I've typed in a question. Is the hub part of the bicycle? Now, I've not explicitly told the computer that it is, but I'll press enter, see what it makes of it. Machine goes away, and yes, it correctly infers from the rules I've given it. The answer is yes, a hub is part of a bicycle.
A lot of applications nowadays are being written in a language called C.
Thank God for
It's
bloody
very
games,
fast
that's all I
and it's
can say.
portable. And that means that you can run a C program easily on a range of machines. Here's a listing of a simple C program on the Nimbus to print a table of temperature conversions from Celsius to Fahrenheit. Now, this was all typed in on a word processor. To turn it into a program that the Nimbus can run, it has to be compiled. That means running another program that converts the text into Nimbus machine code. But this listing could be compiled to run on a number of machines, and that's what makes it portable.
So, which is the best language? Well, unless you're a professional programmer or you want to do a very specific task, one general-purpose language like BASIC will serve almost all your needs. Now, recently it's become fashionable to knock BASIC. People say it leads to bad, unstructured programming habits. But BASIC can be used in a structured way, and it's fine for most applications. But of course, it's horses for courses.
Horses? There are no horses for courses.
Computing in general is a totally foreign language to many people, and Stephen Castell was clever enough to make a few pence exploiting our natural fears with this book. Although it was published in 1983, which in IT terms is a long time ago, it'll still stand you in good stead at parties with those computer bores. The problem is that information technology is a growing and a changing field, even for those who already work in it.
It's difficult at the best of times to keep up with the fast-moving world of technology, but all the more so if you're a woman with young children.
For the last 5 years I worked as secretary PA for a small family company. And then I got pregnant and my husband moved to Cardiff. So for the last 2 years, my daughter's 2, I haven't done anything at all, apart from this course.
In the Docklands of Cardiff, there's a derelict factory that used to turn out Burley bras. Now it's home for a course in information technology. It's run by women for women, and that means it's designed to fit in with the needs of their children.
My reasons for taking up the course in particular was I wanted to bring my skills up to date. And the crash facilities were, you know, very, very important to me. The fact that my daughter was on the premises. I mean, she was just over 1 when I came, so she was quite young. And I think that means a lot to a lot of the women that attend the course.
Model 1 of the Burley bra.
Molly's children are now both at university, and she hasn't worked outside the home for 20 years. She felt that life and technology were passing her by. After all, when Molly was at school, science was a subject best left to the boys.
Well, by the looks of things.
So, a course with other women with similar apprehensions and standards was appealing. For like many of the others on the course, she was starting from scratch, learning about the hardware as well as the software, and she has a chance to work on her own individual projects.
We've just started on projects which we have to do in our final term. They're for our benefit so that we can go to potential employers and say that we have covered this and have something constructive to show them. This is about light-emitting diodes. And this is just the very first project in the book. And the light should have lit, but it hasn't. So I'm waiting for Joe.
Right, is it working?
No, it isn't lit up.
The students attend for 2.5 days a week for a full year, following a wide curriculum to give them the opportunity to taste all areas of electronics and computing. Then, towards the end of the course, each student spends a month at a local firm, turning theory into practice.
To the other side of that middle line, you've got to actually bridge that gap. So if you take the light-emitting diode out and plug it across the gap,
Jill, who teaches the electronics strand of the course, believes it's short-sighted to teach women just the usual word processing and office skills.
You've missed the first one. This is
on channel 2 of the oscilloscope.
episode 8.
And it's over 1.5 divisions, so that's
7.5
volts, that's right. Now when you want to work out the gain, to see how well your board has actually amplified the input signal, gain is equal to the output voltage divided by input voltage.
At the moment, there is a 50% shortfall in areas of high specialism and expertise. And if women are to take advantage of these job opportunities, then these sort of courses must teach not only traditional office skills, but also all the other aspects of the new technology.
And at the beginning, you didn't think you would be able to do it. You know, you look at the computer and you think, oh, no, you know, this isn't for me. And when they put a soldering iron in your hand, you thought, oh. But now at the end, it seems as if we've always known it. It's just natural now.
South Glamorgan County Council and the EEC have funded the course, but all funding is strictly on the basis that on leaving, the students can and do gain relevant employment. The course has run 2 years and the results are good.
We were very surprised the first year what people did actually manage to get into. Quite a few people went in to become trainers themselves, particularly on youth training scheme kind of jobs. Either they were doing introductory computing or they were doing placement work, trying to help young people find jobs. A few people went in to become trainee programmers. Quite a lot of people went on to various kinds of office work where they were using computers. So they were doing databases or accounts or word processing. Some people went on to sales and others went on to further or higher education in electronics.
Since we transmitted that film, this report has been published by the Equal Opportunities Commission. It says that the story of South Glamorgan's Women's Workshop can and should inform the providers of training elsewhere. Well, if you'd like your own copy of the report with some useful addresses in the back, send a 17p stamp to Equal Opportunities Commission, Overseas House, Key Street, Manchester M3 3HN. That's EOC, Overseas House, Key Street, Manchester M3 3HN. Well, that's all for this week. Next week, we take a look to the future with some of the research projects we've featured in MicroLive. But until then, goodbye.
the intro and outro. Boof! There you have it, folks. Another two extremely interesting computer programs. That was Microfile. So I'm going to get away. Yeah, listen, thank you very much for watching, and I'll be along for yeah, a waffle at some point on Friday probably, and I will be along on Sunday for the usual live stream. So until next time, folks, thank you very, very much for watching. See you later.